Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my videos, please click the like button. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. October 1916. The war had taken so much from so many, and among the countless soldiers who returned home with scars both visible and hidden was James Fletcher. The fierce autumn wind swept through the streets of his hometown as he stepped off the train, his limp evident with each step. A heavy concussion had sent him back from the front lines, a blow that left his body battered and his mind adrift. James had always been a robust man, his laugh hearty, his presence commanding. Now, he was a shadow of his former self, eyes clouded with memories too dark to share. The familiar streets felt foreign, the bustling life around him starkly contrasting with the haunting silence of the trenches. His parents were waiting at the station, their faces etched with worry and relief. They embraced him gently, as if afraid he might break. Returning to the family home, James was struck by its unchanged warmth. The smell of his mother's cooking, the creak of the wooden floorboards, the soft hum of the old grandfather clock, these were the constants that anchored him to a sense of normalcy. Yet the nights were the hardest. Sleep eluded him, and when it came, it was plagued by nightmares of explosions and screams. He would wake up drenched in sweat, the echoes of the battlefield ringing in his ears. His physical recovery was slow. The concussion had left him with bouts of dizziness and piercing headaches. He spent his days in a daze, shuffling between the garden and his bedroom, trying to find solace in the mundane tasks of watering plants and tending to the chickens. His mother would often sit with him, her knitting needles clicking softly, offering silent support. His father, a stoic man of few words, would place a reassuring hand on his shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes. Friends and neighbors visited, their conversations careful and considerate, but James struggled to connect. He felt like an outsider in his own life, a spectator watching from a distance. The world had moved on, but a part of him was still trapped in the mud and blood of the Western Front. The local doctor advised patience and prescribed rest, but James knew that recovery was more than just a matter of time. One evening, while walking along the riverbank, he encountered an old acquaintance, Margaret Thompson. She had been a nurse during the war, her hands skilled in mending broken bodies. They spoke of trivial things at first, the weather, the state of the town, but soon their conversation turned deeper. Margaret understood his silence, his hesitation, and she listened without judgment as he haltingly shared his fears and frustrations. Margaret suggested he join a support group of veterans who met weekly at the community center. Reluctant but desperate for change, James attended his first meeting. There, he found a room full of men like himself, each bearing the invisible wounds of war. They shared their stories, their struggles, and slowly, James began to feel less alone. The camaraderie he had lost at the front found a new home among these kindred spirits. Inspired by Margaret's unwavering support and the stories of resilience from his fellow veterans, James decided to pursue a new direction in life. He enrolled in a local college, choosing to study medicine. His experience as a soldier, the horrors he had witnessed, fueled a desire to heal, to give back. It wasn't an easy path. His mind often betrayed him with flashes of trauma, but he persevered. Years passed, and James transformed. The limp remained, a physical reminder of his past, but his spirit grew stronger. He became a doctor, dedicating his life to helping others recover from their own battles, physical and emotional. The journey home had been long and arduous, but it led him to a place of purpose and peace. James Fletcher, once a lost soldier, found his way back not just to his hometown, but to himself. Through the fog of war and the darkness of despair, he emerged a beacon of hope, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. James Fletcher's return from the war was not the triumphant homecoming he had once imagined. Instead of relief, he was met with an overwhelming sense of emotional isolation and relentless physical pain. His body, ravaged by a severe concussion, became a battleground of its own. Each day he fought against the persistent headaches that throbbed behind his eyes, a constant reminder of the artillery shell that had nearly taken his life. The mornings were the worst. As dawn broke, James would awaken to a pounding in his head so intense it blurred his vision. The simplest tasks became monumental challenges. Standing up too quickly sent waves of dizziness crashing over him, leaving him clutching furniture for support. His limbs, once strong and sure, now felt weak and unsteady. Every step he took was a reminder of his fragility. His family, eager to see him return to his former self, offered endless support. His mother hovered, her eyes filled with worry as she prepared meals he often couldn't stomach. His father, ever the silent pillar, would sit with him in the evenings, sharing a quiet presence that spoke of unspoken fears and hopes. Despite their efforts, James felt a growing chasm between them. They couldn't truly understand the depth of his pain, both physical and emotional. Work was out of the question. The factory where he had been employed before the war was bustling with activity, the clanging of machinery and the hum of labor echoing through the town. But for James, the noise was unbearable. It reverberated in his skull, amplifying his headaches to an excruciating degree. The foreman had been understanding, offering James a position when he felt ready, but James knew that day was far off. His friends, too, had changed. Those who hadn't gone to war were strangers now, their lives untouched by the horrors James had witnessed. They spoke of trivial matters, their laughter ringing hollow in his ears. The veterans he knew had either moved on to other towns or struggled in their own ways, often retreating into silence much like James himself. Social gatherings became torturous. The pressure to engage, to pretend everything was normal, was too much to bear. Nights brought little respite. Sleep was elusive, often shattered by nightmares that transported him back to the trenches. He would wake in a panic, the darkness pressing in around him, the silence suffocating. On particularly bad nights, he would find himself wandering the empty streets, seeking solace in the stillness. The cold night air offered a temporary balm, but the loneliness was inescapable. James tried various remedies to alleviate his pain. Doctors prescribed medications that dulled his senses but provided little relief. Herbal concoctions and home remedies suggested by well-meaning neighbors offered no respite either. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, each movement a reminder of how far he had to go. The progress was painfully slow, and the setbacks numerous. The emotional isolation was as debilitating as the physical pain. James felt trapped in his own mind, the memories of war replaying like a relentless reel. He couldn't escape the images of fallen comrades, the screams of the injured, the deafening blasts of artillery. Conversations with others felt stilted and superficial. How could he explain the weight of his experiences, the guilt of surviving when so many hadn't? It was Margaret Thompson, the nurse he had met along the riverbank, who began to break through his shell. Her understanding gaze and gentle presence offered a flicker of hope. She didn't press him to talk but was there when he chose to. Her support was a lifeline, a connection to the world outside his pain. She encouraged him to seek out the Veterans Support Group, a suggestion that initially filled him with dread but ultimately became a turning point. In the group, James found men who mirrored his own struggles. They spoke of their own battles with physical pain, their nightmares, their isolation. Slowly, James began to share his story, finding solace in their shared experiences. It was a long and arduous journey, but through the support of his peers and the unwavering presence of Margaret, he began to see a glimmer of a future where the pain did not define him. James Fletcher's path to recovery was neither quick nor easy. The physical pain from his concussion remained a constant companion, but with time its grip loosened. The emotional isolation, too, began to lift as he forged new connections and rediscovered his purpose. Though scarred and forever changed, he emerged from the depths of his struggle with a newfound resilience, ready to rebuild his life, one step at a time. As the harsh winter months dragged on, James Fletcher clung to a slender thread of hope. The promise of spring, with its renewal and warmth, seemed to offer a distant possibility of relief from his relentless pain. He held on to this vision as he navigated his days in a state of quiet isolation. His routine was simple solitary walks through the empty streets, where the cold air bit at his skin, and long hours spent reading newspapers, their pages a distraction from the turmoil within. The newspapers were his lifeline to the world beyond his suffering. He pored over articles about the ongoing war, the political shifts, and the mundane happenings of everyday life. Each story was a reminder that life continued outside his bubble of pain. He took solace in the idea that one day he too might rejoin the world with a sense of normalcy. His walks became a ritual, a way to occupy his mind and keep the darkest thoughts at bay. The crisp air cleared his head, and the rhythmic sound of his footsteps provided a small measure of comfort. Despite these small comforts, James couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a cycle of pain and isolation. His headaches persisted, fierce and unrelenting. The dizziness and weakness sapped his energy, making even the simplest activities feel like monumental tasks. Yet, he refused to give in completely to despair. He set his sights on the arrival of spring, hoping that the changing season would bring with it a change in his own condition. One bleak February afternoon, as James sat by the window, lost in the folds of a tattered newspaper, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, and his heart skipped a beat as he recognized the name Arkady Fedosov. Arkady was an old friend, a doctor who had served alongside James at the front. They had shared countless conversations, their bond forged in the fires of war. Arkady had always been the optimist, the one who believed in the power of the human spirit to overcome even the greatest of adversities. James tore open the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. The letter was brief but brimming with the warmth and concern that characterized Arkady. He wrote of his own struggles, the challenges of returning to civilian life, and his hope that James was finding his way. But the most significant part of the letter was an invitation. Arkady had recently opened a small clinic in the nearby town and was reaching out to veterans who needed support. He invited James to visit, offering both medical assistance and the companionship of someone who understood his pain. The letter sparked a flicker of hope in James's heart. Here was a tangible opportunity, a chance to break free from his isolation and seek the help he so desperately needed. He decided to accept Arkady's invitation. The thought of reuniting with his friend and receiving professional care infused him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. As the days slowly lengthened and the first signs of spring began to appear, James prepared for his journey to Arkady's clinic. It wasn't just the promise. The trip to the clinic was arduous, but each mile brought a growing sense of anticipation. When he finally arrived, Arkady was there to greet him, his smile genuine and welcoming. The clinic was modest, but it radiated a sense of care and dedication. James felt a wave of emotion as he stepped inside, a blend of relief and the first stirrings of optimism. Under Arkady's care, James began a regimen of treatment and therapy tailored to his specific needs. The headaches persisted, but with Arkady's guidance, he found ways to manage them. The physical therapy sessions, though challenging, helped restore some of his strength. Most importantly, the emotional support from Arkady and the other veterans at the clinic provided a sense of camaraderie that James had sorely missed. With each passing week, James felt a gradual improvement. The isolation that had once suffocated him was replaced by a network of understanding and support. The promise of spring, once a distant hope, became a reality as the days grew warmer and the world around him began to bloom. James still had a long road to full recovery, but he faced it now with renewed motivation and a steadfast belief in the possibility of healing. Arkady's invitation had been a lifeline, pulling him from the depths of his despair. Surrounded by friends and guided by the hands of skilled healers, James found the strength to look beyond his pain and envision a future filled with hope. James Fletcher's journey to the village where his friend Arkady Fedosov had opened a clinic was both a physical and emotional challenge. The route took him through dense forests and winding paths, each turn revealing landscapes that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The air grew colder as he neared the village, and a sense of foreboding settled over him, the kind that seemed to seep into his bones. Upon arrival, the village presented itself as a place caught between time and mystery. Its cobblestone streets twisted through clusters of ancient houses, their thatched roofs covered in a thin layer of frost. The people moved about with a quiet urgency, their eyes darting nervously to the shadowy edges where the forest met the village. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken tension, as if the very air vibrated with anticipation. Arkady greeted James warmly, yet there was a subtle tension in his demeanor, a shadow behind his eyes that spoke of unspoken worries. As they walked through the village, Arkady began to share the strange occurrences that had plagued the area. Whispers of supernatural events had become common, and the villagers, steeped in local folklore, were gripped by a collective anxiety. One evening, by the flickering light of a fire in Arkady's modest home, James learned of the village's most persistent legend, the tale of the Shadow Walkers. According to local folklore, these were spirits of those who had died unjustly or with unfinished business, returning to wander the village and its outskirts. Their presence was heralded by inexplicable cold spots, ghostly whispers, and the sudden extinguishing of flames. Arcady recounted how the villagers had started seeing figures in the mist, shadows that moved with a life of their own. These apparitions were always at the edge of vision, disappearing when directly looked at. Animals acted strangely, dogs barking at empty air and cattle refusing to enter certain areas. There were reports of strange symbols appearing overnight, carved into the bark of ancient trees or etched into the frost-covered windows. James listened, intrigued and unsettled. His own experiences with the horrors of war had made him skeptical of the supernatural, yet the palpable fear among the villagers was undeniable. His logical mind struggled to reconcile the eerie events with reality, but he couldn't ignore the weight of Arcady's words or the urgency in his friend's eyes. The first night in the village, James experienced the unsettling atmosphere firsthand. As he lay in the small room Arcady had prepared for him, he heard soft whispers that seemed to drift through the walls. He dismissed them as wind at first, but the voices grew clearer, speaking in tones too hushed to understand yet too persistent to ignore. He felt a chill that seemed to emanate from within, not from the cold outside, and he shivered under his blankets. Over the following days, James ventured out to speak with the villagers, hoping to understand more about the strange happenings. He found them reluctant to discuss the events in detail, their fear evident in their evasive glances and hurried words. However, the fragments of stories he did gather painted a picture of a village under siege by forces beyond comprehension. One elderly woman, her face lined with age and worry, shared with James the significance of the symbols. According to her, they were protective marks, meant to ward off malevolent spirits. Yet their appearance had the opposite effect, inciting fear rather than providing comfort. She showed him an ancient book filled with drawings and descriptions of these symbols, passed down through generations. The book spoke of rituals and offerings to appease the spirits, traditions that had fallen out of practice as the village modernized. As James delved deeper, he became more invested in uncovering the truth behind the supernatural claims. He and Arcady formed a partnership, combining Arcady's medical knowledge and local respect with James's analytical mind and fresh perspective. Together, they began to document the sightings, symbols, and strange occurrences, seeking patterns and explanations. One particularly dark night, the village was thrown into chaos. A thick fog rolled in from the forest, enveloping the houses in an impenetrable veil. The whispers grew louder and shapes moved within the mist. James and Arcady, armed with lanterns and determination, ventured into the heart of the fog. They followed the symbols, now glowing faintly in the eerie light, leading them to an ancient oak at the village's edge. Underneath the tree, they found an old, weathered stone altar, partially buried and covered in moss. The ground around it was disturbed, as if recently unearthed. As they examined the site, a figure emerged from the mist. It was indistinct, a shifting silhouette that radiated a cold, sorrowful presence. James felt a chill run down his spine as the figure approached, its eyes, or what he perceived as eyes, locking onto his. With Arcady's guidance and the knowledge from the old woman's book, they performed an ancient ritual, an offering to the spirits. The figure paused, its form flickering, before slowly dissipating into the night. The fog lifted, and the oppressive atmosphere that had gripped the village seemed to ease. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences lessened. The villagers, though still wary, began to breathe easier. James and Arcady continued their work, documenting their findings and helping the villagers reconnect with their protective traditions. The partnership strengthened their friendship and gave James a renewed sense of purpose, a fight not against the horrors of war, but against the unknown. The village, with its shadows and whispers, had drawn James into a world where folklore and reality intertwined. He realized that healing wasn't just about mending the body, but also understanding and addressing the fears that lurked in the shadows of the mind. Together with Arcady, he faced these fears, bringing light to the darkest corners of the village, and in doing so, began to find his own path to recovery. James Fletcher's evenings in the village often ended with him and Arkady Fedosov sitting by the fire, discussing the strange occurrences that seemed to haunt the area. One such evening, Arkady began to share the local legends that had been passed down through generations, stories that painted a picture of a land where the supernatural and the everyday intertwined. Arkady spoke of the wedding of the dead, a tale that sent shivers down James's spine despite his skepticism. According to the legend, a young couple who had died tragically on their wedding day were said to rise from their graves once a year to complete their interrupted ceremony. Villagers claimed to have seen ghostly figures dancing in the moonlight, their faces pale and eyes hollow. These apparitions were believed to bring misfortune to anyone who witnessed them, their spectral presence a reminder of love lost to the cruel hands of fate. Another chilling story was that of the devil in the sleigh. Arkady described how, on particularly cold winter nights, villagers would hear the sound of a sleigh gliding over the snow, though no tracks were ever found the next day. The tale spoke of a man who had once foolishly boasted that he would give anything for wealth and power. One night, as he traveled through the forest, a dark figure joined him in his sleigh. The man soon realized he had made a pact with the devil, who now claimed his soul. The villagers believed that hearing the sleigh meant the devil was near, searching for his next victim. Despite the eerie nature of these stories, James could not shake his rational mindset. The horrors of war had instilled in him a deep-seated belief in logic and reason. He listened to Arkady's tales with a mixture of fascination and disbelief, considering them more as cultural artifacts than accounts of actual events. He shared his thoughts with Arkady, explaining that such legends could be understood through the lens of psychology. James referenced the works of Sigmund Freud, particularly the concepts of the unconscious mind and the collective psyche. He suggested that the legends and supernatural beliefs were manifestations of the villagers' deepest fears and desires. According to James, the human mind had a remarkable ability to create and perpetuate stories that provided explanations for the unknown, a coping mechanism for the anxieties of life. The sightings, the sounds, the symbols, James argued, they are all products of the environment and shared imagination. People see what they expect to see, what they fear to see. Arkady listened thoughtfully, respecting James's perspective. He acknowledged the power of the human mind and the influence of collective belief. Yet he also pointed out that these legends had tangible effects on the villagers, shaping their behaviors and experiences. Whether real or imagined, the fear they instilled was genuine, and the consequences often very real. James couldn't deny the psychological impact of these stories. He observed how the villagers' lives were dictated by the legends they believed in. Children were kept indoors after dark, elders performed rituals to ward off evil, and strange symbols appeared to offer protection against unseen forces. These actions, while seemingly superstitious, provided a sense of security and community. Determined to explore further, James began to document the legends and the villagers' reactions to them. He interviewed locals, gathering details about their personal experiences with the supernatural. His findings painted a complex picture of a community bound by tradition and shared fears, each story a thread in the fabric of their collective identity. One day, James and Arkady decided to investigate a recent sighting related to the wedding of the dead. They ventured to the village cemetery under the cover of night, equipped with lanterns and notepads. The air was thick with tension, every rustle of leaves and whisper of wind amplifying their unease. They reached the supposed site of the spectral wedding, a clearing bathed in the pale light of the moon. As they waited, James noted the heightened state of his senses. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a potential harbinger of the supernatural. Despite his skepticism, he couldn't entirely shake the feeling of dread that settled over him. Hours passed, and while they witnessed nothing out of the ordinary, the experience left an indelible mark on James. They shared their findings with Father Georgi, who was horrified to learn how his teachings had been twisted. The priest vowed to rebuild the villagers' trust and to guide them away from the paralyzing grip of superstition. Through their ordeal, James found a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced not just the shadows of the supernatural but the darker aspects of human nature. Together with Arkady, he had uncovered the truth, blending rational inquiry with a deep respect for the villagers' beliefs. As the village slowly healed, James realized that understanding and empathy were as crucial as science and reason in confronting the unknown and protecting those he had come to care for. James Fletcher was determined to uncover a rational explanation for the mysterious deaths plaguing the village. His scientific skepticism clashed with the villagers' superstitious beliefs, but he was unwavering in his quest for logical answers. He delved into medical research, explored environmental factors, and even consulted with other doctors, hoping to find a natural cause for the deaths of the pregnant widows. Despite his efforts, the village's atmosphere grew increasingly eerie. Whispers of curses and malevolent spirits pervaded every conversation, intensifying the fear that gripped the community. James's logical mind struggled to reconcile the tangible fear he witnessed with his scientific approach. The turning point came one moonless night when Arkady Fedosov proposed a venture that would push James to the edge of his rationality: a nighttime investigation of the village cemetery. Arkady suggested that perhaps something at the cemetery, the resting place of the women's deceased husbands, held the key to understanding the phenomenon. Though skeptical, James agreed, knowing that any lead, no matter how implausible, was worth pursuing. As they entered the cemetery under the cloak of darkness, the air seemed to thicken with an otherworldly presence. The wind rustled through the trees, creating ghostly whispers that set James's nerves on edge. Despite his skepticism, the atmosphere of the cemetery, with its crumbling tombstones and shadowy corners, invoked a primal fear he could not ignore. Arkady led the way, his lantern casting flickering shadows that danced across the graves. They moved quietly, their breath visible in the cold night air. As they approached the section of the cemetery where the recently deceased widows were buried, an unsettling sound reached their ears: a faint, high-pitched wail, like the cry of an unborn child. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, sending a chill down James's spine. James and Arkady exchanged uneasy glances but pressed on, their curiosity outweighing their fear. The wailing grew louder as they neared a cluster of graves marked with fresh earth. The sound was piercing, almost unbearable, and seemed to resonate with an unspoken sorrow. James felt a surge of unease, a creeping realization that some things might lie beyond the realm of scientific explanation. Suddenly, the lantern's light flickered and extinguished, plunging them into darkness. James's heart raced as he fumbled for a match to relight it. In the inky blackness, the wailing transformed into whispers, echoing around them in a language they could not understand. The whispers seemed to seep into their minds, sowing seeds of doubt and fear. When the lantern finally flickered back to life, its dim light revealed a figure standing among the graves. The figure was shrouded in a tattered cloak, its face obscured by shadows. James and Arkady froze, their breath caught in their throats. The figure raised a hand, pointing towards a particular grave, and then vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Trembling, they approached the indicated grave. The headstone was old and weathered, its inscription barely legible. As they bent down to read it, the wailing ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. The grave belonged to a woman who had died in childbirth many years ago, her baby stillborn. James realized with a sinking feeling that they were standing at the intersection of past and present tragedies, a place where the sorrow of lost lives seemed to linger and intertwine. In that moment, James confronted the limits of his skepticism. The rational explanations he clung to felt inadequate in the face of such profound mystery. He felt the weight of the villagers' fears and the possibility that something truly inexplicable was at work. Returning to Arkady's home, James struggled to process what they had experienced. He and Arkady discussed the possibility that the eerie phenomena were psychosomatic responses to grief and stress, amplified by the environment and the collective fear of the village. They considered the role of local legends in shaping perceptions and creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of dread and death. Yet James couldn't shake the memory of the wailing and the cloaked figure. Despite his scientific rigor, he had to acknowledge that some mysteries might never be fully understood. He continued to document their findings, blending empirical observations with an openness to the unknown. His friendship with Arkady grew stronger as they navigated this complex and frightening terrain together. James's systematic approach began to yield more concrete leads. They identified plants and herbs in the area that, if improperly handled, could produce toxic effects similar to those seen in the deceased women. This discovery pointed towards the possibility of accidental poisoning or even deliberate use of such substances. However, they still needed to prove how these toxins were administered and by whom. Their investigation ultimately led back to Ivan, the church caretaker, whose presence at the cemetery and the homes of the victims had not been a mere coincidence. Confronting him once more, they found incriminating evidence, a collection of rare herbs and a book on toxicology hidden in his quarters. Ivan, realizing he had been caught, confessed to using the herbs to manipulate the villagers' fears and exact revenge for perceived wrongs during the war. With Ivan apprehended, the death ceased, and the village began to heal. James and Arkady's relentless pursuit of truth had uncovered the dark human motivations behind the seemingly supernatural occurrences. James's belief in rational explanations was reaffirmed, though tempered by an understanding of the powerful role that fear and belief play in shaping human experience. As the village returned to a semblance of normalcy, James continued to explore the delicate balance between science and superstition, knowing that the truth often lay somewhere in between. His journey through fear and reason had changed him, imbuing him with a deeper appreciation for the mysteries of the human mind and the unseen forces that shape our world. The village was cloaked in an uneasy silence following the arrest of Ivan, the church caretaker. Yet the mystery of the pregnant widow's deaths remained unresolved. James Fletcher and Arkady Fedosov were determined to uncover the final piece of the puzzle, even if it meant delving into morally ambiguous territory. Arkady proposed a daring plan, a clandestine exhumation of the graves. James hesitated. The idea of disturbing the final resting places of the deceased troubled him deeply. Exhumation carried not only legal risks but also profound ethical implications. Arkady argued that this was the only way to gather definitive evidence and confirm their suspicions about the causes of death. Reluctantly, James agreed, understanding the gravity of their mission. They planned meticulously. The exhumation had to be conducted in the dead of night, with no witnesses. They chose a night with no moon to minimize visibility and ensure the village was asleep. They gathered the necessary tools, concealing them in a large canvas bag, and set out towards the cemetery under the cover of darkness. The cemetery, already a place of eerie quiet, seemed even more foreboding at night. The air was thick with an oppressive stillness, broken only by the sound of their cautious footsteps. As they approached the graves of the deceased women, a sense of dread washed over James. The gravity of their actions weighed heavily on his conscience. They worked quickly and silently, their breaths visible in the cold night air. James's hands trembled as he unearthed the first grave. The task was grueling, both physically and emotionally. Every shovelful of dirt felt like a violation, but they pressed on, driven by their need for answers. When they finally reached the coffin, James paused, his heart pounding. The wooden lid was weathered and cold to the touch. He exchanged a solemn glance with Arkady, who nodded, urging him to proceed. They carefully pried open the coffin, revealing the remains of the first woman. The sight was sobering, and James felt a pang of guilt and sorrow. They conducted their examination with the utmost respect, searching for any signs of foul play or unusual substances. Arkady took samples of hair, nails, and soil from around the coffin, while James meticulously documented their findings. The process was repeated for the other graves, each exhumation deepening their unease, but also bringing them closer to the truth. As dawn approached, they covered their tracks, carefully refilling the graves and restoring the earth to its original state. Exhausted and burdened by the weight of their actions, they returned to Arkady's home, where they began analyzing the samples. The results were revealing traces of a rare toxin, derived from the herbs they had found in Ivan's possession, were present in the remains. This confirmed their theory that the women had been poisoned. Their findings brought a measure of closure, but the ethical implications of their actions haunted James. He struggled with the morality of their decision to exhume the bodies. Was the pursuit of truth worth the desecration of the graves? He pondered the balance between scientific inquiry and respect for the dead, grappling with the lines they had crossed. Arkady, too, felt the weight of their actions, but he was resolute in his belief that uncovering the truth justified their methods. They had exposed a malevolent force within the village, and their findings could prevent further tragedies. Together they faced the village council, presenting their evidence and explaining the necessity of their actions. The council was shocked but ultimately accepted their findings, understanding the importance of the truth for the safety and peace of the village. James and Arcady's actions, though controversial, were seen as a necessary evil in the face of such dark circumstances. The village began to heal, and the fear that had gripped the community slowly dissipated. In the end, James learned that the pursuit of knowledge often comes with ethical complexities and moral dilemmas. His journey had forced him to confront the limits of his skepticism and the depth of his convictions. He emerged from the experience with a deeper understanding of the delicate balance between reason and respect, science and spirituality. The village, now free from the shadow of its past, could look towards a future with newfound hope and resilience, guided by the truths that James and Arkady had uncovered. James Fletcher and Arkady Fedosov returned to the cemetery under a shroud of darkness, their earlier exhumation having yielded only part of the mystery. They had found traces of poison, confirming foul play, but now they faced an unsettling anomaly that required further investigation. The discrepancies they encountered during their examination of the first grave left them with more questions than answers. As they prepared to exhume the next grave, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The cold night air felt even colder, and the silence was oppressive. They worked quickly, their breaths misting in the air, and soon unearthed the coffin of another pregnant widow. James's hands shook as he pried open the lid, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. When the lid finally gave way, they were met with a shocking sight. Contrary to their expectations, the body inside showed no signs of decomposition. The flesh was eerily well preserved, the skin almost lifelike in its pallor. James and Arkady exchanged bewildered glances, their minds racing to understand this anomaly. "How can this be?" James whispered, his voice tinged with disbelief. "She died months ago. There should be significant signs of decay." Arkady knelt beside the coffin, examining the body more closely. His fingers traced over the skin, noting the unnatural preservation. "This defies all medical understanding," he said, his tone a mix of awe and horror. "It's as if time has stopped for her." Adding to their confusion, there was no sign of a fetus, despite the woman having appeared pregnant at the time of her death. Instead, they found strange, unexplained damage to the body. The skin bore marks that resembled animal bites, yet the wounds were oddly clean, lacking the expected signs of infection or decay. "This is impossible," James muttered. "These injuries, they look fresh, but they can't be." As they continued their examination, they discovered more unsettling details. The woman's abdomen showed signs of having expanded, but there was no evidence of a post-mortem birth or any remnants of a child. It was as if the pregnancy had been an illusion, a grotesque trick of the eye and mind. Arkady looked up from the body, his face pale. "James, what if we're dealing with something beyond our current understanding of medicine? Something that combines both the physical and the metaphysical?" James struggled to reconcile the inexplicable evidence before him with his scientific principles. The preserved body, the absence of decay, the strange wounds, all these pointed towards phenomena that lay beyond the reach of conventional medical science. He felt a growing tension between his rational mindset and the unexplainable reality before him. They carefully took samples of the woman's hair, nails, and the strange wounds, hoping to find some clue that would explain the anomalies. As they worked, James's mind churned with questions. Could these phenomena be the result of a rare and unknown pathogen, a toxin, or even an ancient form of embalming that had been lost to time? Or was it something far more sinister and supernatural? Their analysis of the samples back at Arkady's home only deepened the mystery. The tissues showed no signs of the expected cellular decay. Instead, they seemed almost suspended in time, as if preserved by an unknown force. The marks on the body, initially thought to be animal bites, bore no resemblance to any known creature's attack patterns. They were clean, almost surgical, yet completely inexplicable. Theories began to swirl in their minds. Arkady suggested the possibility of postmortem parturition, where a dead body can expel a fetus due to gas buildup. However, the complete absence of a fetus made this theory unlikely. They also considered the possibility of a rare preservative in the soil, but the localized nature of the phenomenon ruled this out. As they pondered the implications, James couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The eerie preservation of the bodies and the strange wounds suggested an external influence, something that transcended their current scientific understanding. Arcady, sensing James's inner turmoil, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We must keep searching, James. We owe it to these women to uncover the truth, no matter how disturbing it might be." Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, they decided to investigate the village's history and local folklore further. They spoke to the oldest residents, hoping to uncover tales that might shed light on the strange occurrences. They learned of ancient rituals and long-forgotten practices that hinted at dark arts and forbidden knowledge, passed down through generations in whispers and shadows. One story in particular stood out. It spoke of a healer who had once lived in the village, a woman accused of witchcraft and dark magic. She had been known to preserve bodies and manipulate life and death in ways that defied explanation. Her knowledge had supposedly been lost to time, but the recent events suggested that someone might have rediscovered her secrets. Driven by this lead, James and Arcady delved deeper into the village's archives, uncovering manuscripts and texts that described the healer's methods. They found references to herbs and concoctions that could suspend decay and even simulate life. It became increasingly clear that someone in the village had been using these ancient techniques, but to what end? Their investigation took a darker turn as they discovered that the healer's knowledge included not just preservation, but also manipulation of the mind and body. The strange pregnancies, the wounds, the preserved bodies all pointed towards an orchestrated effort to instill fear and control through the appearance of supernatural events. James and Arcady knew they were close to the truth, but the closer they got, the more dangerous their quest became. They had to confront not just the physical manifestations of this ancient knowledge, but also the moral and ethical implications of exposing and stopping it. In the end, their determination to seek the truth and their willingness to face the unknown led them to uncover a sinister plot rooted in both ancient magic and modern manipulation. The village, once shrouded in fear and superstition, began to see a glimmer of hope as the true nature of the deaths was revealed. The blending of science and folklore, reason and belief, had ultimately brought them to the answers they sought, challenging their understanding of the world and leaving an indelible mark on their souls. James Fletcher and Arkady Fedosov were confronted with a conundrum that defied all logic. The bodies of the pregnant widows, exhumed in the dead of night, presented a mystery that seemed to slip through their grasp with each new discovery. The preservation of the bodies, the absence of decomposition, and the strange, animal-like wounds had only deepened their bewilderment. Yet in their meticulous investigation, they found no clear signs of violence or the presence of any known toxins. The causes of death and the peculiarities of the bodies remained maddeningly elusive. They returned to Arcady's home, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on their shoulders. The samples they had taken yielded no conclusive evidence. The tissue analysis showed no typical markers of poisoning or physical trauma. The wounds, although bizarre, did not match any known patterns of attack or injury. It was as if the bodies themselves were resisting explanation, their secrets buried as deeply as they had been in their graves. "How can there be no trace of what caused this?" James asked, frustration evident in his voice. He paced the room, the flickering light of the oil lamp casting elongated shadows on the walls. There must be something we're missing, some clue that ties all of this together. Arkady leaned over the examination table, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We have to consider every possibility, no matter how far-fetched it seems. These deaths are not natural, but they also don't fit any conventional understanding of foul play." They spent hours reviewing their notes, re-examining the samples, and brainstorming possible explanations. One hypothesis was that the preservation of the bodies could be due to a rare environmental factor in the soil. However, the localized nature of the phenomenon and the consistency across different graves made this unlikely. They also considered the possibility of an unknown pathogen, but there were no signs of infection or disease processes typically associated with such cases. Could it be some kind of psychological effect, James mused? A shared delusion or mass hysteria that somehow manifested physically in these women? Arkady shook his head. While psychological factors can explain certain symptoms or behaviors, they can't account for the physical preservation and the wounds we found. There must be a physical cause, even if it's something we haven't encountered before. Their investigation led them to explore the historical and cultural context of the village further. They interviewed more villagers, delving into local legends and folk tales. They learned of a belief in spirits that could possess and preserve bodies, preventing them from decaying as a sign of unrest or unfinished business. These stories, while intriguing, offered no tangible evidence. One night, as they pored over ancient texts in the village's small library, they stumbled upon a manuscript detailing the practices of a long-forgotten sect. This sect believed in rituals that could halt decay and inflict spiritual wounds as a form of punishment or control. The parallels to their case were unsettling. Could someone in the village be trying to recreate these rituals? James wondered aloud, using fear and superstition to manipulate the community. It's possible, Arcady replied, but to what end? And how are they achieving such precise results? The more they uncovered, the more their hypotheses expanded. They considered the role of rare plants, the potential for a hidden practitioner of ancient arts, and even the influence of powerful psychological suggestions. Yet, without concrete evidence, their theories remained speculative. Their breakthrough came in the form of an unexpected visit from Father Georgi, the village priest. Though initially wary of their scientific inquiries, he had come to respect their dedication. He brought them a bundle of old letters and diaries, passed down through generations of his family. Among these documents were references to a mysterious healer who had lived in the village centuries ago, a woman reputed to possess knowledge of both healing and curses. One diary entry stood out. It described a ritual involving a rare herb, said to preserve bodies and create illusions of pregnancy and wounds. The herb's properties were largely unknown, but its effects were described in terms eerily similar to what James and Arcady had observed. Armed with this new lead, they set out to find any remaining traces of this herb in the village. Their search led them to an overgrown section of the forest on the outskirts, where they discovered a patch of plants matching the description. Samples taken from these plants revealed compounds with potent preservative qualities, as well as the ability to induce a trance-like state in those exposed to them. James and Arcady realized that someone had been using this herb to create the appearance of supernatural events. The preservation of the bodies and the strange wounds were likely the result of carefully administered doses of the herb, combined with psychological manipulation. As they pieced together the evidence, a clearer picture emerged. The deaths were not the result of malevolent spirits or ancient curses, but of a calculated plan to exploit the villagers' fears. The women had been poisoned with the herb, which preserved their bodies and created the illusion of pregnancy. The wounds were likely self-inflicted or caused in a state of induced trance, designed to enhance the appearance of supernatural forces at work. Their investigation eventually led them back to Ivan, the church caretaker, who had a deep knowledge of local herbs and a history of personal grievances. Confronted with the evidence, Ivan confessed to his role in the deaths. He had used the herb to manipulate the villagers, driven by a desire for control and revenge. With Ivan's confession, the mystery was finally solved. The village, though scarred by the events, began to heal. James and Arcady's dedication to uncovering the truth had prevailed, blending scientific inquiry with an understanding of human psychology and cultural beliefs. James emerged from the ordeal with a renewed sense of purpose. The experience had tested his beliefs and pushed the boundaries of his understanding. He realized that the pursuit of truth often required an open mind, a willingness to consider the improbable, and a deep respect for the unknown. As the village returned to normalcy, he and Arcady continued their work, knowing that the world held many more mysteries waiting to be uncovered. The visit to the village priest added a layer of complexity to James and Arcady's investigation. Father Georgi's presence underscored the religious undercurrents that ran deep within the community, stirring up moral dilemmas that challenged their scientific convictions. As they sifted through old letters and diaries, they grappled with the implications of their discoveries in the context of faith and spirituality. Father Georgi, though initially skeptical of their methods, ultimately recognized the value of their pursuit of truth. His willingness to share family heirlooms and historical documents spoke to his belief in the importance of understanding the mysteries that plagued their village. Yet, his presence also served as a reminder of the moral implications of their actions. The rituals and practices they uncovered hinted at a darker side of human nature, one that exploited fear and superstition for personal gain. As they delved deeper into the religious teachings and cultural traditions of the village, James and Arkady found themselves confronting their own beliefs and biases. They questioned the boundaries between science and faith, reason and belief, as they sought to reconcile the inexplicable phenomena they encountered with their understanding of the world. The discovery of the herb and its use in manipulating the villagers raised profound moral questions. How could they reconcile their commitment to uncovering the truth with the potential harm caused by exposing the darker aspects of their community? Were they justified in unraveling the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the surface, or were they risking further upheaval and turmoil? These moral dilemmas weighed heavily on James and Arkady as they pursued their investigation. They grappled with the implications of their actions, knowing that their quest for knowledge could have far-reaching consequences. Yet, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to protect the vulnerable, they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The quiet life of the women in the small village offered a stark contrast to the tumultuous events unfolding around them. James and Arkady's investigation shed light on the harsh realities faced by these women, whose lives were shaped by loss, hardship, and the absence of children. In a village where fertility was prized above all else, the inability to bear children carried a heavy stigma. The widows, left alone to mourn their husbands' deaths, found themselves on the fringes of society, their worth measured by their ability to fulfill traditional roles as wives and mothers. Yet, despite their struggles, they remained resilient, their spirits unbroken by the challenges they faced. James and Arkady's inquiries into the deaths of these women sparked curiosity and concern among the villagers, who saw in them a glimmer of hope for answers to questions long left unanswered. The women's stories, though tinged with tragedy, served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As James and Arkady delved deeper into the socio-cultural context of the village, they uncovered layers of complexity and nuance that challenged their preconceived notions. They learned of long-standing traditions and customs that shaped the lives of the villagers, as well as the deep-seated beliefs and superstitions that governed their actions. The absence of children in the village, once seen as a curse, became a focal point of their investigation. They questioned the societal norms and expectations that placed such a heavy burden on women, and they sought to understand the underlying causes of their infertility. In doing so, they shed light on the struggles faced by these women and the ways in which their lives were shaped by forces beyond their control. As they pieced together the puzzle of the village's dark secrets, James and Arkady found themselves drawn deeper into the lives of its inhabitants, their empathy and compassion driving them to seek justice for those who had been wronged. In the end, their journey brought not only answers but also a deeper understanding of the human condition and the complexities of the world in which they lived. The conversation with Father Georgi delved into the intertwining realms of religion and the occult, illuminating the shadowy corners where belief and superstition collided. As they sat in the dimly lit confines of the church, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, they discussed the implications of the unfolding events on the fabric of society and the fates of individuals caught in the grip of inexplicable phenomena. Father Georgi's words carried the weight of centuries of tradition and wisdom as he spoke of the ancient texts and teachings that shed light on the mysteries they sought to unravel. He drew parallels between the current events and the tales of old, weaving a tapestry of faith and fear that spanned generations. His voice, low and resonant, held the echoes of prayers uttered in times of strife and supplications offered in the face of the unknown. As they explored the religious motifs underlying the events unfolding in their midst, James and Arkady found themselves confronting questions that transcended the boundaries of science and reason. They pondered the nature of evil and the existence of forces beyond human comprehension, grappling with the age-old struggle between light and darkness, faith and doubt. Father Georgi's insights shed new light on their investigation, prompting them to consider the possibility of divine intervention and demonic influence in the events they sought to understand. They delved into the ancient texts, seeking clues hidden within the pages of scripture and legend, hoping to find answers to the enigmas that plagued their village. As they sat in Arkady's study, surrounded by books and manuscripts, James and Arkady engaged in heated debates over the horrific deaths and strange occurrences that had gripped their village. The air crackled with tension as they exchanged theories and hypotheses, each more outlandish than the last, as they sought to untangle the web of mysteries that surrounded them. Their discussions ranged from the mundane to the macabre, touching on everything from ancient curses to modern medical anomalies. They debated the possibility of demonic possession and other supernatural phenomena, exploring the limits of human understanding in the face of inexplicable events. The medical and historical puzzles they encountered only deepened the mystery, leading them down twisting paths of inquiry and speculation. They examined the bodies of the victims, searching for clues that might shed light on their deaths, but found only more questions lurking beneath the surface. As they sifted through the evidence, they unearthed tantalizing hints of a hidden history, a dark tapestry of secrets and lies woven into the fabric of their village's past. They pieced together fragments of ancient texts and folklore, uncovering echoes of a time when superstition held sway over reason and the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural blurred. Their quest for answers took them to the edge of sanity and beyond, as they delved deeper into the heart of darkness that lay at the heart of their village. With each revelation, they edged closer to the truth, but also further from the safety of ignorance, as they grappled with the terrifying realization that some mysteries were never meant to be solved. The landscape of the village was steeped in history, its soil rich with the echoes of centuries-old traditions and beliefs. James and Arcady encountered traces of a cultural and religious heritage that stretched back to the mists of time, a tapestry woven from the threads of pagan rites and Christian sacraments. As they wandered the winding paths that crisscrossed the countryside, they stumbled upon ancient stone circles and weathered statues, relics of a bygone era when gods and spirits walked the earth. These remnants of a forgotten past whispered secrets to those who cared to listen, their silent testimony to the enduring power of faith and superstition in shaping the lives of the villagers. In the heart of the village, they discovered a small shrine dedicated to the local saints, their weathered icons bearing witness to the trials and tribulations of generations past. Here, amid the flickering candlelight and the scent of incense, they found solace in the quiet contemplation of mysteries too deep for words. Yet beneath the veneer of piety and devotion, darker forces lurked, hidden from view but ever present in the shadows. They heard whispered tales of midnight rituals and clandestine gatherings, of secret rites performed under the cover of darkness to appease ancient gods and ward off malevolent spirits. The village was a place of secrets, its narrow streets and shadowy alleyways concealing mysteries that defied explanation. James and Arcady heard whispered rumors of strange disappearances and inexplicable deaths, of shadows that moved of their own accord and voices that spoke from beyond the grave. As they delved deeper into the enigma that gripped the village, they encountered tales of vanished travelers and spectral apparitions, of haunted woods and cursed fields. Each new revelation added another layer to the mystery, drawing them ever closer to the heart of darkness that lay at the center of their investigation. They combed it through dusty archives and crumbling manuscripts, searching for clues that might shed light on the sinister forces at work in their midst. They pieced together fragments of folklore and legend, unraveling the tangled threads of truth and illusion that bound the village in their thrall. But the more they uncovered, the more elusive the truth became, slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. They found themselves caught in a web of deception and deceit, where nothing was as it seemed and danger lurked around every corner. Yet, despite the mounting evidence of a malevolent presence stalking the village, they refused to be deterred. Armed with nothing but their wits and their courage, they pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden in the darkness, no matter the cost. The arrival of the forbidden tome, the teachings of hieromonk Xenophon on the abominations of this hidden world sent shockwaves through the quiet sanctuary of the village church. Father Georgie's reaction was swift and severe, his stern countenance betraying a mixture of disbelief and disapproval. The book, with its lurid descriptions of forbidden rites and unholy pacts, struck at the very heart of his beliefs, challenging the sanctity of his faith and the purity of his soul. As James and Arcady observed the priest's reaction, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creeping over them. The book seemed to exude an aura of malevolence, its pages pulsing with dark energy that threatened to engulf all who dared to gaze upon its forbidden contents. Yet, despite the warnings and admonitions of the priest, they found themselves drawn inexorably towards its pages, their curiosity outweighing their fear. Father Georgie's paternal guidance on the virtues of literature and the dangers of delving into the forbidden realms of knowledge resonated deeply with James and Arcady. His words carried the weight of centuries of tradition and wisdom, reminding them of the sacred duty they bore to safeguard their souls from the corrupting influence of the written word. As they listened to the priest's impassioned sermon on the perils of forbidden knowledge, they couldn't help but reflect on their own experiences with the dark forces that lurked within the pages of forbidden texts. They recalled the chill that had run down their spines as they pored over ancient tomes and occult manuscripts, their minds grappling with concepts too terrible to comprehend. Yet, despite the warnings and admonitions, they knew that their quest for truth would inevitably lead them into the darkest recesses of human knowledge. They understood that the path they had chosen was fraught with peril, that the pursuit of knowledge could exact a heavy toll on their souls. But they also knew that they could not turn back, that they were bound by duty and honor to uncover the secrets that lay hidden in the shadows, no matter the cost. And so, as they stood in the hallowed halls of the village church, they pledged to continue their quest, to delve ever deeper into the mysteries that lay at the heart of their village, knowing that they walked a dangerous path, but trusting in their faith and their friendship to guide them through the darkness. As James and Arcady delved deeper into the enigmatic events surrounding the bodies of the deceased widows, they uncovered a tapestry of intrigue and deception that stretched back through the annals of time. Their discussions, conducted in hushed tones and shadowy corners, revealed a series of bizarre circumstances surrounding the deaths of the women, as well as the peculiar state of their remains. They examined the bodies with meticulous care, searching for clues that might shed light on the macabre mysteries that shrouded their deaths. They noted the absence of decomposition and the strange markings that marred the flesh, their minds racing with theories and conjectures as they struggled to make sense of the inexplicable. With each revelation, they found themselves drawn deeper into the labyrinthine web of secrets that surrounded the widows' deaths, their quest for truth leading them down ever darker paths. They combed through dusty archives and forgotten manuscripts, piecing together fragments of history and folklore in search of answers that remained tantalizingly out of reach. The arrival of the forbidden tome, the teachings of hieromonk Xenophon, sparked a firestorm of curiosity and intrigue in James's heart. As he pored over its pages, his eyes widened in disbelief at the shocking illustrations and lurid descriptions contained within its covers. The book, with its unsettling imagery and cryptic prose, spoke to him in a language that transcended mere words, stirring something primal and instinctual within his soul. Despite the warnings and admonitions of those around him, James found himself unable to tear his gaze away from the book's pages, drawn inexorably towards its forbidden knowledge. He felt a strange sense of kinship with the author, a fellow seeker of truth and enlightenment in a world shrouded in darkness and deceit. As he delved deeper into the mysteries contained within the book, James felt a sense of exhilaration and trepidation wash over him, knowing that he was treading on dangerous ground. Yet, despite the risks, he pressed on, driven by a burning desire to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within its pages, no matter the cost. And so, as he lost himself in the labyrinthine corridors of the book's twisted narrative, James felt himself drawn ever deeper into the heart of darkness, his quest for truth leading him down paths from which there could be no return. Within the intricate illustrations gracing the pages of the teachings of hieromonk Xenophon, James discovered a world teeming with mystical elements and fantastical creatures. Each stroke of the artist's brush seemed to imbue the images with an otherworldly aura, transporting him to a realm where reality blurred and imagination reigned supreme. The scenes depicted in the book hinted at ancient secrets and hidden truths, their enigmatic symbolism hinting at mysteries that lay beyond the realm of human understanding. As James gazed upon the illustrations, he felt a shiver run down his spine, a primal instinct warning him of the dangers that lurked within the pages of the book. The images seemed to pulsate with a life of their own, their grotesque beauty drawing him in even as they filled him with a sense of unease and foreboding. Yet, despite the fear that gripped his heart, he could not tear his gaze away from the mesmerizing tableau before him. The illustrations contained within the pages of the teachings of hieromonk Xenophon description, their bizarre imagery invoking a sense of wonder and terror in equal measure, James found himself transfixed by the sight of creatures that defied the laws of nature: octopuses with human faces, half women, half spiders, and amorphous entities that seemed to shift and change before his very eyes. Each illustration was a masterpiece of macabre artistry, its grotesque beauty drawing him deeper into the twisted narrative of the book. Yet, despite the horror that filled his heart, James could not deny the strange allure of the images, their haunting presence etching itself into his mind with an indelible permanence. As he turned the pages of the book, each new illustration brought with it a fresh wave of terror and fascination, each image more unnerving than the last. Yet, despite the darkness that surrounded him, James found himself unable to resist the pull of the book's forbidden knowledge, his curiosity driving him ever onward into the heart of the unknown. As James delved deeper into the pages of the ancient tome, he found himself confronting a formidable obstacle: the archaic Church Slavonic text in which it was written. The words danced before his eyes, their meaning obscured by centuries of linguistic evolution and religious tradition. He struggled to decipher the cryptic symbols that adorned the yellowed pages, each letter a puzzle to be unraveled in the dim light of his study. The weight of history pressed down upon him as he grappled with the arcane language of the book, its unfamiliar syntax and archaic vocabulary leaving him feeling like a stranger in a foreign land. Yet, despite the frustration and confusion that threatened to overwhelm him, James refused to be deterred. With dogged determination, he pored over the text, searching for clues that might unlock the secrets hidden within its ancient pages. As night fell and darkness shrouded the village in its embrace, James found himself beset by strange visions and eerie sounds that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth. Shadows danced in the flickering candlelight, their movements fluid and sinuous, as if guided by some unseen hand. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and James felt a chill run down his spine as he struggled to make sense of the spectral apparitions that haunted his dreams. In the stillness of the night, he heard whispers on the wind and felt the icy touch of invisible fingers tracing patterns on his skin. His heart pounded in his chest as he searched for meaning in the swirling mists of his imagination, each shadowy figure a portent of doom and despair. Yet, despite the fear that gripped his soul, James could not deny the strange allure of the supernatural, its mysteries beckoning him ever deeper into the heart of darkness. As James pondered the mysterious appearance of a visitor in the dead of night, his mind raced with thoughts of hidden motives and secret agendas. Who could have ventured into the darkness of the night, their purpose shrouded in secrecy and intrigue? Was it a mere coincidence, or was there something more sinister at play? These questions gnawed at James's mind, driving him to seek answers in the shadowy recesses of his imagination. He sifted through the fragments of memory, piecing together clues and half-remembered details in a desperate bid to uncover the truth. Yet, with each passing moment, the mystery only deepened, its tendrils winding their way through the fabric of reality, leaving James feeling more lost and bewildered than ever before. Determined to unravel the enigma that lay at the heart of the night's events, James ventured out into the cold embrace of the winter night, his footsteps muffled by the thick blanket of snow that covered the ground. With each step, he felt the weight of the unknown pressing down upon him, urging him onward in his quest for answers. As he surveyed the scene before him, James's eyes fell upon a series of telltale signs that spoke of clandestine activity: tracks in the snow leading to a shallow depression in the earth, as if something had been buried beneath the frozen ground. His heart quickened at the sight, his mind racing with possibilities as he contemplated the significance of the discovery. With trembling hands, he knelt beside the mysterious pit, his fingers brushing against the cold, hard earth. There was something unsettling about the sight, something that sent a chill down his spine and set his pulse racing with fear. Yet, despite the gnawing sense of unease that gripped his soul, James knew that he could not turn back now. The truth lay buried beneath the snow, waiting to be unearthed, and he was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. As James trudged through the snow-covered landscape, his eyes fell upon a peculiar sight: a gaping hole in the earth, its edges scorched and blackened, as if seared by the intense heat of a blazing fire. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest as he took in the eerie scene before him. What could have caused such a bizarre phenomenon? His mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last, as he struggled to make sense of the inexplicable sight. The edges of the hole were smooth and glassy, as if melted by some intense heat, yet there was no sign of fire or combustion nearby. James knelt beside the strange depression, his fingers tracing the outline of the scorched earth, his senses tingling with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Whatever had caused this anomaly, it was clear that it was unlike anything he had ever encountered before. As James pondered the mysterious pit before him, a sudden sense of unease washed over him, prickling at the back of his neck, like the icy fingers of a long-forgotten nightmare. He turned to leave, his mind buzzing with questions and doubts, when suddenly he heard a sound behind him, the soft rustle of earth and the shuffling of feet. He whirled around to find himself face to face with a figure unlike any he had ever seen before, a man, naked and covered in dirt, his eyes wide and vacant as he stared at James with an expression devoid of emotion. The sight sent a shiver down James's spine, his heart pounding in his chest as he struggled to comprehend the surreal scene unfolding before him. "Who are you?" James stammered, his voice barely more than a whisper as he took a cautious step backwards. But the figure remained silent, its gaze fixed unblinkingly on James, as if searching for something hidden deep within his soul. A cold dread gripped James's heart as he realized that he was not alone, that there was something out there in the darkness watching, waiting, its intention shrouded in mystery and fear. The stranger's sudden appearance was unsettling enough, but what truly sent a chill down James's spine was the bizarre conversation that ensued. The man, seemingly oblivious to his nakedness and the chill of the night air, launched into an unconventional discourse on the nature of gods and the mysteries of the universe. His words were like riddles wrapped in enigmas, each sentence a puzzle to be deciphered in the dim light of the moon. At first, James found himself torn between feelings of incredulity and irritation. Who was this madman, spouting nonsensical gibberish in the dead of night? And yet, as the conversation wore on, he found himself drawn into the stranger's strange and twisted worldview, his words sparking a flicker of curiosity in the depths of James's soul. As the hours slipped by and the night wore on, James found himself engaged in a series of philosophical debates with the enigmatic stranger. They discussed the nature of existence, the meaning of life, and the existence of a higher power, delving deep into the murky depths of metaphysical inquiry. The stranger's arguments were as unconventional as they were compelling, challenging James's preconceived notions and forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about the world around him. He spoke of gods and men, of the folly of mortal ambition and the fleeting nature of human existence, his words resonating with a strange and unsettling wisdom. In the dim light of the moon, surrounded by the silence of the night, James found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about the world. The stranger's words opened new avenues of thought, leading him down paths of inquiry he had never dared to explore before. And as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, James knew that he would never be the same again. Just as suddenly as he had appeared, the stranger vanished into the night, leaving James alone with his thoughts and a lingering sense of unease. It was as if he had never been there at all, his presence evaporating like mist in the morning sun. James stood in stunned silence, his mind awash with questions and doubts, grappling with the implications of the stranger's enigmatic departure. What had he witnessed in those fleeting moments of encounter? And what did it all mean? These were the questions that haunted James as he stared into the darkness, searching for answers that seemed always just out of reach. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, James found himself drawn ever deeper into a world of mystery and intrigue. Strange occurrences began to plague the village, each one more baffling than the last. Dangerous sinkholes appeared seemingly out of nowhere, swallowing up unsuspecting travelers in their gaping maws. Infants vanished from their cribs in the dead of night, leaving behind nothing but empty cradles and grieving parents. And then there was the madman, a wild-eyed fanatic who roamed the countryside proclaiming the virtues of ancient pagan beliefs. His words were like a siren's song, drawing the villagers into a web of superstition and fear. As James and his companions struggled to make sense of these bizarre events, they found themselves confronting forces beyond their comprehension, forces that seemed to lurk just beyond the edge of their understanding, waiting to pounce when least expected. In the face of such overwhelming uncertainty, James could only cling to the hope that somewhere, amidst the chaos and confusion, the truth lay waiting to be discovered. But as each day brought with it new mysteries and new terrors, he began to wonder if they would ever find the answers they sought, or if they were doomed to wander forever in the shadowy realm between reality and nightmare. As James and Arcady delved deeper into the mysteries that surrounded them, they found themselves engaged in a series of profound philosophical debates. They pondered the nature of evil and the existence of mystical beings, probing the boundaries of human understanding in search of answers that seemed always just out of reach. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Some phenomena defied explanation within the framework of Christian demonology, hinting at the existence of entities far beyond the realm of mortal comprehension. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, James immersed himself in the forbidden pages of Hieromonk Xenophon's book, eager to unlock its secrets and unravel the enigma that had consumed their lives. What he found within its yellowed pages was nothing short of astonishing descriptions of ancient rituals and beings that existed in parallel worlds, beyond the confines of traditional religious teachings. The text spoke of creatures that lurked in the shadows, unseen and unknown to the eyes of men, their existence shrouded in mystery and legend. It described rituals that summoned forth these otherworldly entities, invoking powers beyond human comprehension in the pursuit of knowledge and enlightenment. As James delved deeper into the forbidden lore of Hieromonk Xenophon, he began to realize that the truth was far stranger and more terrifying than anything he had ever imagined. For in the dark corners of the ancient tome lay secrets that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality itself, plunging him into a world of darkness and despair from which there might be no escape. In a quiet moment of respite amidst the chaos and uncertainty, James found himself sharing a heartfelt conversation with Arcady. They spoke of their hopes for an end to the war, and with it, an end to the suffering that had ravaged so many families. James expressed a longing for peace, a yearning for a world free from the ravages of conflict, where families could be reunited and communities could heal from the wounds of the past. As the village celebrated the arrival of the new year, the festive atmosphere was shattered by an unexpected knock at the door. James hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest as he exchanged a wary glance with Arcady. Who could it be, arriving unannounced on this most joyous of occasions? The air was thick with tension as they made their way to the door, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. With trembling hands, James swung the door open, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as they stared at each other, neither daring to break the silence that hung heavy in the air. And then, with a voice like ice, the stranger spoke, his words sending a chill down James's spine. In that moment, as the truth began to dawn, James realized that their troubles were far from over, for lurking in the shadows of the night was a darkness more insidious than anything they had ever encountered, a darkness that threatened to consume them all. And as the stranger stepped into the light, revealing his true intentions, James knew that the worst was yet to come. As the New Year's festivities drew to a close, James and Arcady were startled by an urgent knock at the door. The revelry ceased, and all eyes turned towards the entrance, where Mother Evdokia stood, her face pale and eyes wide with concern. "Quickly," she urged, her voice trembling, "you must come with me. Widow Semyonova is dying." Without hesitation, James and Arcady followed her into the cold night, the air crisp and biting against their faces. The village lay silent under a blanket of snow, the festive atmosphere now replaced by a somber urgency as they made their way to Widow Semyonova's humble abode. Upon entering the dimly lit house, James was struck by the scene of profound suffering that lay before him. Widow Semyonova, a frail figure on a simple bed, was surrounded by flickering candlelight that cast long, eerie shadows on the walls. Her labored breaths filled the room with a haunting rhythm, each exhale a struggle against the encroaching darkness. Beside her, Father Georgi stood, his voice steady and filled with compassion as he read prayers over her weakened form. His words, though solemn and comforting, could not mask the palpable sense of helplessness that gripped everyone present. James and Arcady exchanged a glance, their faces etched with sorrow and determination. This was a moment that transcended the mundane horrors they had faced. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the deep, pervasive impact of the war that had torn so many families apart. Mother Evdokia knelt by the widow's side, her hands gently clasping the old woman's as tears streamed down her cheeks. James felt a lump rise in his throat as he watched the scene unfold, each moment heavy with the weight of impending loss. Despite the horrors and mysteries they had been unraveling, nothing compared to the raw, unfiltered anguish of this moment. As Father Georgie's prayers reached a crescendo, the widow's breathing slowed, then ceased. A hush fell over the room, a silence so profound it seemed to echo in the very soul of the house. The war, the mysteries, the strange occurrences, all of it felt distant and insignificant in the face of this intimate, human tragedy. James knew that this night would leave a mark on his heart, a reminder of the delicate thread that held life together and how easily it could be severed. The widow's passing was a stark reminder of the many lives left in ruins and the relentless passage of time that spared no one from its grasp. Just as the room began to settle into the quietude of morning, Mother Evdokia let out a gasp, her eyes wide with a sudden realization. "She's pregnant," she whispered urgently. The words hung in the air, heavy with shock and disbelief. James and Arkady exchanged bewildered glances, their minds racing to comprehend the implications. "We must act quickly," Arkady declared, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. There might still be a chance to save the child. The room was quickly transformed from a somber vigil to a makeshift operating theater. Arkady and James, with the help of Nikolai Pavlovich, prepared for an emergency procedure, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. They worked with what little equipment they had, improvising as best they could in the dim candlelight. Father Georgie continued his prayers, his voice now a steady, comforting presence amid the chaos. James could see the resolve in Arkady's eyes, a determination to defy the odds and give life a fighting chance, despite the overwhelming circumstances. With great care, Arkady made the first incision, his hands steady but his face etched with concentration. The room held its breath as the procedure began, every second feeling like an eternity. James assisted, handing instruments and providing what support he could, his heart pounding in his chest. The procedure was grueling, each step fraught with risk. The widow's frail body was a delicate vessel, and the task at hand required the utmost precision. Sweat dripped down Arkady's brow as he worked, his focus unyielding. At last, after what felt like hours, there was a cry. A weak, but unmistakable cry of a newborn. Relief washed over the room like a tidal wave, the tension breaking into a moment of profound joy and astonishment. They had done it. Against all odds, they had brought a new life into the world. James looked down at the tiny, fragile being in his hands, a mix of emotions swirling within him. This child, born of tragedy and loss, was a beacon of hope in the darkness. But as he gazed at the newborn, he couldn't shake the feeling that their struggles were far from over. The widow lay still, her sacrifice a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. As they cleaned up and wrapped the baby in a warm blanket, James couldn't help but wonder what the future held for this child, born into a world of mystery and danger. The night was far from over, and the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. But for now, in this fleeting moment of triumph, they had carved out a small victory against the encroaching darkness. And in the face of all that lay ahead, that victory was enough to give them hope. As the night wore on, and the initial shock of their success began to fade, James found himself grappling with a torrent of conflicting emotions. The joy of bringing a new life into the world was tempered by the profound sense of loss and the stark realization of the fragile line between life and death. He pondered the moral and ethical ramifications of their actions had they defied nature's course or upheld its deepest imperative by preserving life against impossible odds. In the dim glow of the candles, surrounded by the remnants of their hurried operation, James felt a gnawing unease. The suffering they had witnessed, the inexplicable illnesses and deaths, all pointed to something far more sinister than mere medical anomalies. There was a deep, unsettling injustice at play, a dark force that seemed to mock their efforts and challenge their understanding of right and wrong. The following day, as they continued their investigation into the strange occurrences plaguing the village, they encountered something that defied all logic and understanding. While examining a newly discovered, eerily perfect circle of scorched earth in a secluded part of the forest, they stumbled upon a creature that seemed to crawl out from the bowels of a nightmare. It emerged slowly, its pallid, slimy body undulating with an unnatural rhythm. The thing was long and thick, its alabaster skin almost translucent under the weak winter sunlight. It moved with a sickening grace, a grotesque parody of life, its presence an affront to nature. James recoiled instinctively, a wave of revulsion washing over him. The creature was like nothing he had ever seen, a monstrous, elongated worm, its body pulsating as it advanced toward them. Arkady, maintaining his composure, approached the creature with a mixture of scientific curiosity and palpable disgust. "This must be the source of the corruption," he murmured, his voice tinged with both awe and horror. "An entity so alien, it warps the very fabric of life around it." James could hardly bear to look at the thing, its very existence a challenge to his rational mind. The worm's grotesque form seemed to mock the natural order, a living embodiment of the perverse and the malignant. As it writhed closer, James was struck by the realization that they were facing a force far beyond their comprehension, a malevolent presence that had infiltrated their world and twisted it to its own dark purposes. In that moment, the disparate threads of their investigation began to weave together into a terrifying tapestry. The strange illnesses, the inexplicable deaths, the eerie manifestations, they were all connected, all symptoms of the same underlying malevolence. This creature, this abomination, was at the heart of it all. As they retreated from the creature, the weight of their task pressed heavily upon them. They were not just battling an unknown illness or a series of unfortunate events, they were confronting a profound and ancient evil, a force that defied understanding and threatened to consume everything in its path. And as they prepared to face this new and terrifying adversary, James couldn't help but feel a deep, abiding dread for what lay ahead. The sight of the grotesque, pulsating worm left everyone in stunned silence. Father Georgi, his face pale and drawn, instinctively clutched his crucifix and began to mutter fervent prayers, the words spilling out in a desperate litany of protection. The old woman beside him, her hands shaking, crossed herself repeatedly, her eyes wide with fear and revulsion. They had seen many strange things in their lives, but nothing like this. "Where did it come from?" James asked, his voice trembling, but no answer came. The creature's origins were as enigmatic as its presence was terrifying. Determined to uncover the truth, Arkady stepped forward, his expression a mixture of scientific curiosity and grim resolve. "We need to understand what we are dealing with," he said, his voice steady despite the horror before them. He carefully approached the worm, holding a lancet with a practiced hand. With a swift, precise motion, Arkady pierced the creature's side. The response was immediate and utterly unexpected. The worm's body convulsed, expanding rapidly, as if filled with air. Its pale skin stretched to an almost translucent thinness, revealing a writhing mass beneath. And then, from deep within the creature, came a sound that sent chills down everyone's spine, a plaintive, high-pitched wail, eerily reminiscent of a newborn's cry. James felt a surge of horror and pity at the same time. The creature's cry was disturbingly human, a sound that invoked a primal response to nurture and protect, even as its appearance repelled them. Father Georgi's prayers grew louder, more urgent, his voice breaking with emotion. The old woman sobbed, tears streaming down her face as she continued to cross herself. Arkady, his face set in grim determination, withdrew the lancet and stepped back. "This is beyond any natural science, I know," he said, his voice tinged with both awe and despair. "It's as if we're dealing with something from another realm entirely." The creature's cries grew softer, more pitiful, as its body continued to expand and contract. It was a grotesque parody of life, a twisted imitation of the birthing process. James watched in morbid fascination and growing dread, realizing that they had stumbled upon a force that defied all understanding. "We must find a way to stop this," Arkady said, his voice breaking the spell of horror that had gripped them all. "Whatever this creature is, it's a manifestation of something deeply wrong. We cannot let it continue to exist." As the wailing creature lay before them, the enormity of their task became painfully clear. They were facing not just a physical abomination, but a spiritual and existential threat. The creature's unnatural existence was a blasphemy against the natural order, a herald of something far darker and more insidious. And in the face of such overwhelming horror, They had no choice but to stand firm and confront the nightmare head-on. The eerie scene unfolding in the dimly lit room of the dying widow's house seemed to embody the eternal struggle between light and darkness, good and evil, the human and the supernatural. The presence of Father Georgie, with his fervent prayers and unyielding faith, stood in stark contrast to the grotesque, otherworldly creature writhing on the floor. It was as if this moment captured the very essence of mankind's battle against unseen, malevolent forces. The theological implications were not lost on James. As he watched Father Georgie clutch his crucifix, invoking divine protection, he realized they were witnessing more than a mere anomaly. This was a manifestation of the ancient and perpetual conflict that lay at the heart of human existence. The worm, an aberration of nature, represented a tangible embodiment of the evil that seeks to corrupt and destroy, while the prayers and symbols of faith represented humanity's undying hope and resilience. As the worm continued to expand and emit its haunting cry, a palpable sense of terror and disbelief gripped the room. The monstrous creature, a grotesque parody of a newborn, evoked a visceral reaction from everyone present. The shock and horror etched on their faces mirrored the trauma of witnessing the unimaginable, a nightmare given flesh. The old woman sobbed uncontrollably, her frail body shaking with each breath. Father Georgie's prayers faltered, his voice trembling as he tried to maintain his composure. Even Arcady, who had approached the creature with scientific detachment, seemed to struggle with the emotional weight of the moment. The grotesque infant-like wail of the creature was a stark reminder of the darkest aspects of their world, echoing the unending pain and suffering wrought by war and loss. James felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. The sight of the worm, with its human-like cry, was a chilling symbol of the more sinister facets of existence, facets that had been brought to the fore by the relentless violence and despair of the war. The trauma of the battlefield, the suffering of those left behind, and the creeping dread of an unknowable evil all converged in this horrific spectacle. In that moment, James understood that they were not merely fighting against an aberrant creature, but against the very embodiment of the fears and horrors that had plagued them since the war began. The worm's existence was a reminder of the fragility of life and the ever-present threat of darkness lurking at the edges of their reality. As the creature's cries began to fade, a heavy silence settled over the room. The tension was almost tangible, the air thick with the weight of what they had witnessed. Father Georgie, his face a mask of grim determination, stepped forward and sprinkled holy water over the writhing form, reciting prayers for deliverance and protection. The old woman's sobs turned to quiet weeping, her tears mingling with the prayers of the priest. Arcady, his expression resolute, turned to James. "We must destroy this creature and uncover the source of this corruption. Only then can we hope to restore balance and peace to this village." James nodded, his resolve hardening. The horror they had faced tonight was but a symptom of a deeper, more pervasive evil. They had to delve further into the mystery, confronting the malevolent forces head-on, no matter the cost. With a final pitiful wail, the creature ceased its movements. The room, once filled with fear and despair, now seemed to hold a fragile sense of hope. They had taken the first step in a long and arduous journey, a journey that would test their faith, their courage, and their very humanity. As they prepared to leave the widow's house, James cast one last glance at the now still creature. It was a stark reminder of the darkness they fought against, a symbol of the unyielding evil that sought to encroach upon their world. But in the presence of that darkness, their determination to seek out the light and protect the innocent burned brighter than ever. The appearance of the monstrous, infant-like creature stunned everyone in the room, spreading a wave of fear and bewilderment. The sight was so jarring, so utterly alien, that it felt as though reality itself had been fractured. The villagers who had gathered outside the widow's home, drawn by the commotion, gasped and murmured in a mix of horror and awe as the grotesque figure was revealed. Father Georgie, the village priest, crossed himself repeatedly, muttering prayers under his breath in a desperate attempt to ward off what he believed to be a manifestation of pure evil. The monstrous creature, with its grotesque resemblance to a human infant, seemed to carry profound symbolic weight. Its presence in the house of a dying widow invoked a cascade of religious imagery and biblical allusions. For Father Georgie, the creature was reminiscent of the demonic entities described in the Book of Revelation, those that would herald the end times and the final judgment. His mind raced with verses, each one amplifying the dread that gripped his heart. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the creature's eerie wails. The biblical references flowed freely in the minds of those present, linking the unholy sight before them to ancient prophecies and divine retribution. Arcady, his face pale but resolute, leaned closer to James. "We are dealing with something beyond our understanding, something that defies the natural order," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of fear and determination. "But we must remain rational. We need to understand this phenomenon if we are to protect the villagers." James nodded, though his thoughts were clouded by the surreal nature of what they were witnessing. The creature's cries had an almost hypnotic quality, drawing their focus even as they recoiled in horror. The juxtaposition of its infantile form with its monstrous nature created an unsettling tension, challenging their perceptions of reality and morality. As the initial shock began to wear off, James felt a surge of resolve. "We need to figure out where this thing came from and what it signifies," he said, his voice firm. "There must be clues in the old texts, something we've overlooked." Father Georgie, though visibly shaken, nodded in agreement. "This abomination cannot be allowed to persist," he declared. "We must seek divine guidance and protection, but also understand that which we face. The scriptures may hold the answers, but so might the forbidden knowledge we have shunned." The grotesque infant lay still now, its cries silenced, leaving the room in an oppressive silence. The villagers outside whispered amongst themselves, fear and superstition taking root in their hearts. Inside, the trio of Arcady, James, and Father Georgie knew that their journey had only just begun. The creature was a symbol of a deeper mystery, one that would require them to delve into the darkest corners of their knowledge and faith. As they prepared to leave the widow's house, the enormity of their task weighed heavily upon them. The monstrous child was not merely a creature to be feared, but a cipher, a harbinger of greater truths and greater terrors. They would need to confront their deepest fears and challenge their most cherished beliefs to uncover the truth and protect the innocent lives of their village. The night had brought forth a monstrous revelation, and with it, a call to action. Their path was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it was a path they could not avoid. The struggle between light and darkness, between human and inhuman, was now their burden to bear, their mystery to unravel. The monstrous apparition was only the beginning of the horrors that followed. As the night wore on, a powerful earthquake rocked the village, tearing through the land with merciless force. Houses crumbled into heaps of rubble, and the earth itself seemed to convulse in agony. Screams of terror and despair filled the air as families were torn apart, children buried beneath the debris of their homes. The ground split open, swallowing entire structures and creating chasms that seemed to lead into the very depths of hell. The devastation was unimaginable. The villagers, already paralyzed by fear from the appearance of the grotesque creatures, were now faced with a natural catastrophe of epic proportions. Amidst the chaos, Arcady and James tried to organize rescue efforts, but the sheer scale of destruction made it almost impossible to save everyone. The death toll rose steadily, each loss a painful reminder of the night's horrors. As dawn broke, the monsters that had terrorized the village vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. With their disappearance, the earthquake ceased and an eerie calm settled over the devastated landscape. The sudden end of the tremors was as inexplicable as their onset, leaving the survivors to grapple with the profound silence that followed. In the days that ensued, the village began the arduous process of recovery. The connection between the monstrous apparitions and the seismic activity was undeniable, yet no one could offer a concrete explanation. The strange occurrences that had plagued the village for so long seemed to have been banished along with the creatures, but the scars left behind were deep and indelible. The events of that night were meticulously recorded in the village's chronicles, becoming a part of the local lore and a subject of intense scrutiny for years to come. Scholars and scientists visited the area, eager to understand the bizarre phenomena that had unfolded. Despite numerous investigations, the exact nature and cause of the events remained elusive. The monstrous creatures, the sudden earthquakes, and their abrupt disappearance defied conventional explanation. Some researchers proposed theories involving unknown geological forces or rare natural phenomena, while others speculated about psychological and mass hallucination triggered by collective trauma. However, no hypothesis could fully account for the terror experienced by the villagers or the physical devastation wrought upon the land. The Night of Horrors became a legend passed down through generations as a cautionary tale and a source of local identity. The villagers, forever marked by the experience, found solace in their shared survival and the stories they told to make sense of the inexplicable. The once vibrant community was now a somber place, where the memory of those lost in the catastrophe was honored with reverence and sorrow. Arkady and James, their lives irrevocably changed, continued their quest for answers, delving deeper into ancient texts and forbidden knowledge. Their investigations led them to uncover more about the mysterious book by hieromonk Xenophon, which hinted at otherworldly forces and rituals that could open gateways to parallel dimensions. The truths they uncovered were disturbing and profound, suggesting that the events in the village were but a glimpse into a larger, more terrifying reality. In the end, the village's tale was one of resilience and the enduring human spirit. The scars of that night served as a reminder of the fragile boundary between the known and the unknown, the natural and the supernatural. It was a story that highlighted the eternal struggle to comprehend and coexist with forces beyond human understanding, a story that would never be forgotten. The revelation that the creatures could take on the forms of infants or polyp-like entities sent waves of fear and bewilderment through the village. Witnesses were left grappling with the terrifying implications of these shape-shifting beings. Their presence defied all natural laws, presenting a mystery that seemed beyond human comprehension. The very fabric of reality felt distorted, leaving the villagers in a state of heightened anxiety and constant dread. Arkady, drawing on his extensive knowledge of folklore and history, suggested that these monstrous entities had a tendency to awaken before significant upheavals, revolutions, civil wars, and other periods of profound instability. He recounted tales from different cultures where similar beings were said to emerge as harbingers of chaos and change. According to him, their appearance was not just a random occurrence but a portent of turbulent times ahead. This connection added a new layer of fear, as it implied that the village might be on the brink of a great and terrible transformation. The narrative took a deeper, more symbolic turn with mentions of the naked man seen in the pit and the eerie premonitions of geological disturbances. This figure, embodying raw and untamed nature, seemed to represent a bridge between the human world and the unknown realms. His appearance, along with the strange seismic activities, underscored the mystical nature of the events unfolding in the village. The naked man, covered in dirt and speaking in riddles about ancient gods, became a focal point of the villagers' collective fears and superstitions. His presence was a stark reminder of humanity's vulnerability in the face of forces beyond their control. The pit, with its scorched edges and ominous depth, symbolized a gateway to the underworld, further deepening the sense of dread. The villagers could not shake the feeling that the appearance of these beings and the naked man was a prelude to something catastrophic. The ground beneath them, literally and metaphorically unstable, seemed ready to open up and swallow them whole. This sense of impending doom was pervasive, influencing every aspect of their lives. It was as if the village itself was a living entity, groaning under the weight of an ancient curse. As Arkady and James delved deeper into the mysteries, they uncovered more about the book by hieromonk Xenophon. The ancient text described rituals and entities from parallel dimensions, offering clues that were as enlightening as they were disturbing. The more they learned, the more they realized that the village was a nexus of supernatural activity, a place where the veil between worlds was thin and fragile. The once peaceful village was now a hotbed of supernatural occurrences. People reported seeing strange lights in the sky, hearing disembodied voices, and experiencing unnerving encounters with shadowy figures. The villagers, caught between fear and curiosity, sought answers from Arkady and James, who had become reluctant leaders in this dark exploration. The diary of Arkady and the book by the hieromonk Xenophon have become revered artifacts within the local museum, serving as tangible links to the unsettling events that shook the region. Encased in glass, under dim lighting that lends an air of mystery, These items tell a story that transcends the boundaries of time and space. Visitors to the museum are drawn to these relics, their curiosity piqued by the tantalizing prospect of uncovering the truth behind the enigmatic creatures and their impact on the area's history. As they stand before the exhibit, they feel a sense of awe mingled with trepidation, knowing that they are glimpsing into a world where the ordinary and the extraordinary collide. The diary, with its weathered pages and cryptic entries, offers a first-hand account of the horrors that Arkady and his companions faced. It speaks of their courage in the face of unimaginable danger and their unwavering determination to uncover the secrets hidden in the shadows. Alongside the diary rests the ancient tome of the hieromonk Xenophon, its pages yellowed with age and its words imbued with a strange, otherworldly power. Visitors marvel at the eerie illustrations and cryptic passages, wondering what dark secrets lie hidden within its pages. The museum exhibit serves not only as a repository of historical artifacts, but also as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of the unknown. It reminds visitors that even in the darkest of times, there is hope, and that the quest for knowledge and understanding is a journey worth undertaking. And as they leave the exhibit, their minds buzzing with questions and their imaginations sparked by the mysteries they have encountered, they carry with them a newfound appreciation for the complexities of the world around them.